But again, that does not mean that HR is your friend. They are there to see to the benefit of the company. They are not an employee assistance program where they do therapy with employees, although they do provide programs like EAP to help employees when they need so. But there's often, that kind of confusion. People don't realize sometimes that HR is there for the company and not just there for the employees. Some examples of how HR functional strategy have really sort of revitalized or transformed an existing business is the Shanghai Ritz-Carlton Portman Hotel. When Ritz-Carlton took over that hotel, they applied their, as I mentioned earlier, corporate parenting. Ritz-Carlton, they historically, they are the first service-oriented company. HR, not friends of anyone. that's sometimes feels that way. I hear you. Especially when they have to start laying off people, their HR usually ends up being the one to execute those kinds of strategies and right sizing. And by the way, ironically, right sizing or laying people off does not mean that company is going down. It sometimes means that they came up with new technologies, to robotics or something to actually to be more performing better. Unfortunately, that results in laying off people. So obviously, from people's perspective who losing their jobs, that's a very, very bad thing. But for the overall performance of the corporation perspective, it can be a very good thing. And so, if you are an executive and your job depends on organizational performance, sometimes you have to make tough calls like that. And sometimes, in order to save more employees, you have to let go of few employees. So it's not always very straightforward. But again, going back to Ritz-Carlton, Ritz-Carlton was the first service type of business, because obviously hotel is a service, that won the Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award. It happened in the 90s. It was unheard of for any company to, because it was strictly considered to be a manufacturing type of award, that quality, control, quality management, total quality management back in the day when they call it, they all followed Baldrige criteria, and it was mostly applied to marketing by Edward Deming and so forth back in the 70s. And so Ritz-Carlton became the first service-oriented business that met those high, very strict quality standards. I actually did a study, a little paper in my master's program in Hawaii on Ritz-Carlton, and they're amazing. They're amazing. They trained their people so well. Every employee in Ritz-Carlton, they carry a little card that says, "We are the ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen." So they want the employees to feel as important as the important guests. And they also give employees up to $1,000 authority to give a refund or, pay for damages if they accidentally damage the, luggage of a customer. They would say, "Don't worry, ma'am, we'll take care of it. I'll have it repaired for you." So they can, without asking their supervisor, they can make those kind of calls. And so they empower their employees. They ask the employees to consider themselves ladies and gentlemen. They ask them to show the highest possible quality standards. When you call Ritz-Carlton, everybody's going to answer the phone the same way. They are trained to remember their guests' names. They have a system that allows that. So they have certain what they call moments of truth in quality management, certain things that matter to employees that they have really taken care of. You can take your pet to Ritz-Carlton and they have a menu for your pet to room service for different gourmet pet foods. that sounds silly. And I certainly wouldn't take my huskies to a hotel room. Actually, I did once, and my husky ended up chewing the corner of the hotel room door. And so, luckily, I had paid the bed fee, and they, let it cover it, so I didn't have to pay for the whole door. But yeah, never again. We went to the beach in Destin, Florida, and left our husky, in a room in a little crate, and it was like a portable crate. And of course, she decided to break out of that crate and tried to come after us and started chewing the door. So yeah, never again. But rich people, if they have little poochies, little poodles, or something like that, then they carry them around everywhere. They love their dogs like their little babies, and so they want to give them gourmet dog food, and so Ritz Carlton will cater to that. And so in Portman Hotel, Ritz Carlton was able to implement those functional strategies and tactics that they had in place in other Ritz Carlton hotels, and they completely transformed that hotel. And so it was a pretty amazing success story of how you can use your excellence in managing people to turn around a hotel. And a lot of it was interesting because there were some, cultural differences and cultural variations, on how Asian customs and Asian ways of treating people are slightly different than Western ways. And so that case study is interesting to consider the differences. In Japan, it's interesting. Japan, they if they have to change your room, for example, they will take your toothpaste, toothbrush, everything, and they move it to another room, and they'll put them in exactly same position, exactly same way like it was before you left. If there is a fire drill in a Japanese hotel, they'll give everybody bathrobes to go to the street, for the fire drill, so that they all feel kind of united and safe together. So sometimes in Asian cultures, they do things differently, and certainly China is different than Western society. So they had to adjust their corporate policies and procedures to suit their Shanghai location. Zappos is an interesting company. They want the employees to have the wow factor, and I mean, they're a clothing company and shoe and clothing company, so I guess it works for that kind of industry. But they emphasize fun. They when they interview employees, select new employees, they have a game show type of a interview situation, and so they make it kind of fun. And so they want people to be that way. They want them to have that kind of edge, that kind of wow factor. And so it's certainly kind of cool and certainly different. Southwest Airlines is a little bit the same way. If you go apply for a job at Southwest Airline, they can turn around and say, sing for us. And you're like, what? You want me to sing for you? I mean, this is a job interview and you want me to sing. And of course, the purpose is not to find out how good singing voice you have. They don't care about that. What they do care about is that how do you respond when somebody makes an idiotic request? Because when you are working as a flight attendant or, uh, in that kind of a job or a ticket counter or something, sometimes you have angry customers. Sometimes you have people asking maybe unreasonable requests. And so they want the employees to be ready for those, and they want to hire people who are quick in their feet that way and able to turn around and make fun. I remember taking a Southwest airline flight once when the flight attendant, this was before 9/11, they wouldn't make these kind of jokes anymore, but flight attendant announced and said, well, our pilot fell asleep, so while we're waiting for our pilot to wake up, we're going to have a competition. Whoever has the most holes in their sock wins a free drink. And I mean, everybody started laughing and taking their shoes off and counting holes in their sock. And so I mean, they try to make flying fun, humorous, and do little silly things like that. Zappos is kind of the same way. They They want the culture to be very special, very fun, very wow. Other other company that is very similar is Whole Foods. Whole Foods employees have to all be kind of like, they are all like hippies. They when you go apply to a job with Whole Foods, they will bring the whole store, all the employees together in kind of a circle, and it's kind of like a whole village choosing the member, new tribal member. And so they use some unique ways, and Zappos is known for that, and they've turned that to be a very effective tool. Again, it works for their industry. There would be other industries and other kind of businesses where that kind of a, joking around kind of a wow kind of environment would not work. But those are just examples of how to make functional strategies work for that particular business. So sustainability has become a really, really big issue in HR. This is a big topic for me personally. I live in a part of the world over here by Mexican Gulf of Mexico over here, where we have a lot of hurricanes, and every year we get worse and worse hurricanes. This particular year is interesting because it's been so dry that normally the Mobile Bay region is the rainiest place in the United States. And this summer, we haven't had rain. We have had hot, over 100 degrees, plus humidity, to the point that people's grass is not growing in the lawns anymore. And we worry about that because that heat means that the Gulf of Mexico is going to be extra warm, which means that when there's a hurricane, it's going to be like jet fuel powering the hurricane, that warm water. And so every year we have worse hurricanes. And when you're in a hurricane zone and you get hit by a category 4, you can lose your home. In one night, you can lose your home. 3 years ago, I think, we had Hurricane Sally that was almost category 4 that hit us pretty directly. And it was scary. We had to evacuate, and we went to Birmingham and came back after 2 weeks. Luckily, our home was still intact. We had to obviously empty refrigerators and things like that because power went out for a couple of weeks. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that, because of climate change, because of global warming, because of overpopulation, because of pollution, because of a lot of these things, we are slowly but steadily, we are destroying Earth. And, human resource has to be involved with that. They have to help companies to be sustainable. Social responsibility is a really, really big thing these days. All companies pollute. And in order for them to give back to the society, they have to be socially responsible, and they have to, try to make up for what they pollute. It's technically in economics, they call it Pareto optimality, which means that you have to give back to the society roughly the same amount that you are polluting and damaging the society. So if I have a factory and it's right next to the lake, and there's a city or a little town next to the lake, and I dump my dirty water into the lake and I pollute the lake, well, if I don't clean it up, who's going to clean it up? Well, the community is going to have to clean it up. The city, the town right by the lake is going to have to clean it up. And the only way they're going to clean it up is that they're going to increase taxes. So people, have to pay more taxes so that they all collectively clean up that lake, which means that people are going to demand higher salaries. So they're going to go back to factory and say, now by polluting the lake, you forced us to pay higher taxes. So now we need more salary in order to work for you to pay for those higher taxes. So the idea here is that what goes around comes around. And if the corporations do not take private responsibility of being socially responsible, and they roll that cost to the society, in the end, everybody pays for it, and it comes back to haunt them. So the idea of understanding social responsibility is for companies to realize that they are responsible for that. It's very difficult for some companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, where essentially their products are unhealthy for the most part. Sugary, water. I mean, I drink Diet Coke. So, I mean, I'm not any better than anybody else. I love their products, but they're not healthy, and they are sold in containers that, plastics that remain in the environment, for a long time. Cans that are hard to recycle. Of course, it's easier with metal cans than it is with plastic bottles. Philip Morris, how do you justify a business that is selling cigarettes that are, without doubt, unhealthy? And so, interestingly, Philip Morris finances more anti-smoking campaigns than any other institution or organization in the world. In other words, the company that sells the cigarette is also sponsoring all the anti-cigarette campaigns, and help people stop smoking. Doesn't that make any sense? They are helping people to stop using their products so that they could go out of business. Well, it's the socially responsible thing to do, and they, in some sense, have been forced to do that by laws, because if they don't, they spent decades denying the risks of cigarettes, and governments finally went after them and smacked them with fines and saying, if you don't do this and this and this, will shut you down. And so now they are forced in that corner. Automobile companies right now are running to come up with electronic vehicles because the pollution standards are about to hit them. And so there are many examples of how to turn social responsibility, and that has to be baked in to their corporate strategies, functional HR strategies. Many companies, they get their employees to volunteer to do some things. I used to do that kind of a thing at State University of New York, college at Oneonta. I opened a center called Center for Social Responsibility and Community with grant money that we got from WK Kellogg Foundation, the cereal company. And so we opened up this center where our mission was to involve people in service learning and volunteering and socially responsible activities, and to reward students, give them honors recognition for service hours, and also give workshops and lectures in corporations around New York to teach them about social responsibility. And I actually went and gave lectures all the way in Finland and in Europe on these topics to train them in social responsibility. So it's a big global thing. And some of these tools that strategic human resource management that they utilize is, of course, strategy map. I mentioned earlier that strategy, is a map. It's a roadmap of where to go. And so, in the same way, like corporations have to have strategic plans. Well, in those strategic plans, they have to be a functional HR section, and that becomes kind of the strategy map of where the company is going and how staffing is used properly to support that goal. Interestingly, if you're going to open up a new location or a new strategy and need more employees, you cannot start recruiting those employees the day of the opening of that new location. You have to be starting to recruit them year before, and then you have to time the onboarding just right with the new location. Otherwise, there's nobody working in that new location, but you also don't want to hire a bunch of people and pay them salaries for nothing, for not having any work to do. So it's very strategic how you kind of recruit people and how you manage your people. There's always turnover, and so you have to replace people and so forth. And so that's why companies maintain these HR scorecards. It's kind of like a balanced scorecard where you combine behavioral measures with financial measures, and who is responsible for what and when they are supposed to finish that project, and what projects has to be undertaken HR wise to reach those goals in your strategic map. It's pretty straightforward. It's not complicated, but it just takes a little planning and little documentation and little tracking. And so these days, a lot of companies have these digital dashboards that HR managers can go right away there, and so they can see certain metrics right on their computer screen. Mohammed said, believe the reason for this is that compensating people with cancer would be significantly more expensive. You're right, about tobacco companies. But I mean, it's sad. It's sad to say this, but it takes a lot to get companies to get to that point where they accept that proactive is smarter than paying those settlements if somebody sues you, because people with cancer don't often have money to sue you. Corporations have hundreds of lawyers, and an individual with cancer, how are you going to fight your cancer and to fight the corporation and find a lawyer who is willing to take the case and pay that lawyer? Now, there are some legal clinics that take pro bono cases, if they are straightforward and easy. But if there's any complication or uncertainty in your case, nobody's going to take it. So, there's some movies about these kinds of things, Erin Brockovich or something like that talk about how individuals went after corporations and they won big things and whatever. But there are also many, many cases where people do not fight and cannot fight. They can afford to fight. So there's situations like with Ford long time ago. They had a situation where one of the rear blinker lights, turning signals, was designed too close to the gas tank. And if there would be a certain collision and certain angle, it could light up the gas tank and, it would explode the car. So they knew about this. They knew that these cars could, under certain situations, explode. But fixing the problem was more expensive to them, to change all the manufacturing, processes and, equipment and everything, what they needed to do, that it was more expensive to do that than to fight the lawsuits that occurred. So I mean, it's evil, in my opinion. But companies have made those kind of financial determinations, saying it's cheaper to do this. Well, people may die, but we save money. Chrysler had a minivan once where there's a latch in a back door that could be could be easily opened by a kid from indoors. So now you have a kid in a minivan inside, and they're playing with the door, and the latch opens, and the kid falls off the car. Again, an example where they knew about it, they could have fixed it, but so few people thought it that it was a risk that they determined to worth taking. So horrible things sometimes happen. Companies are not always socially responsible. They only focus on fiscal responsibility, and for a long time, social responsibility was considered to be only fiscal responsibility, that corporate managers and stockholders only have the fiduciary financial fiscal responsibility for the company. Social responsibility was not considered to be part of that. Now, in today's world, we understand that a little bit, that, yeah, it's more than just about money. We have to make some ethical choices. But back in the day, it wasn't that way. So yes, these digital dashboards are pretty savvy. I mean, it's management by data, big data, collecting a lot of data points, feeding them into a computer system, algorithms, and then having a dashboard. You can log in all the time. You can see exactly where you are with certain metrics, and you can assess and analyze where you are with your performance that way. So let's talk about those metrics. Metrics obviously are the quantitative gauge, the way we track human resources management activity. So there are different metrics. Different companies have different kinds of metrics. Benchmarking is when you compare your practices to other companies. You say, hey, here's a very, very high performing competitor, and this is what we need to learn. I mean, I use these sport analogies. I used to be a boxer, so I spent my childhood watching Muhammad Ali fights. Now I'm obviously not as good at Muhammad Ali, but the point is that if you want to learn how to box, you follow the best, and you watch the fights of the best. If you want to be, the best of the world soccer player, you probably are watching Messi or Ronaldo right now. And so, examples go on and on and on. You want to learn from the best. Corporations do benchmarking that way too. And then they use statistical and mathematical analysis to find these relationships and make predictions. I just wrote business analytics for, it was called Analytics for Decision Making course for another university at the doctoral level, a doctoral course where it's all about statistics and quantitative methods of how to analyze, do correlations, regression analysis to statistically prove and try to predict the future, basically. And so that kind of data analytics is done in HR all the time to be able to determine what works, what doesn't, and where we're gonna go. Benchmarking is very important, like I said earlier, because just because you measure something, it's okay to measure. Obviously, you have to measure, but how do you know if your measurements are good or not? Well, you compare that against somebody else. Again, sports analogy. Sprinters, runners. They get certain time on 100 meters or 200 meters. Well, they're gonna look at that time and measure it against the world record, and they're gonna determine how far away they are from that world record. So just measuring is not enough. You have to be able to compare it to something to say, how are we doing? The problem becomes where you are the lead dog. They always say, I have sled dogs, so I have these jokes about sled dogs, but they say that the scenery only changes if you're the lead dog. I mean, think about it. If you're not the lead dog, you're only looking at the rear of another dog. So you have to be the lead dog to see the scenery changing, right? So if you are the top dog, who are you going to compare? And so that becomes difficult for like Coca-Cola Corporation. They are undisputed global leader in their field. Nobody's going to turn around and say Coca-Cola is not the number one. Pepsi Cola, Dr. Pepper, they're small companies compared to Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola doesn't have any benchmark. They can't say, well, let's try to be as good as this other company. So when you read Coca-Cola's annual report, they benchmarks, their goals are measured in terms of percentage of the liquids consumed by human race. And currently, they estimate that the percentage of the total liquids consumed by humans on Earth, that Coca-Cola products represent 5% of it, or was it 15%? I don't remember right now, I'm sorry. But anyway, the point is that it's a certain percentage, and they said they would like it to be 50%. That half of everything, every liquid consumed in Earth would be a Coca-Cola product. That's how they measure their success based on percentage of liquids consumed. So that's a little bit of a different way of benchmarking, but nevertheless, you have to set your bar somewhere. And so, when you are the best, it's harder. So Society for Human Resource Management, and of course, this is old information, 11, 12, but they are more or less the same still, which is interesting. This book is 2020, and they don't have more recent information, so that's kind of interesting. But hold on, let me take a sip of my tea. I'm not British, but I work with British people, so I'm drinking tea now. So organizational data, obviously, is used in human resource management as well. Revenue per full-time equivalence. So when you look at companies have part-time employees or whatever, so in order to do that calculation, you consider what would be the number of employees if everybody would be full-time. That's what FTE means. And then you look at net income before taxes per employee, full-time employee, and what kind of positions are included within organization's succession plan. And so those are all sort of the organizational metrics. There's employment kind of data that you can measure: number of positions filled, time to fill, how quickly you're able to hire somebody to an open position. And that actually gets a very complicated discussion too, because it's not just about fastness. Sometimes quality is important. Well, sometimes it's always important. But you not only have to fill the slot, but you also have to fill the slot with the good quality employee. Cost per hire, how much does your recruitment, your selection process cost you? And that's where the quality comes in. How do you hire top quality people in fast enough time, cheap enough, way? And that's where a lot of these job boards are becoming artificial intelligence based. And there are lots of inexpensive job boards. LinkedIn is becoming a way to a lot of companies to hire people inexpensively. The problem with that is that when it becomes cheaper, a lot of scammers and crooks, come out, and they come up with schemes and things to impersonate companies, and try to hire employees and then get some money out of them, or something like that. There are all kinds of different schemes going on out there. So people have to be super careful these days. And then there are a lot of pyramid schemes that are trying to hire in these job boards, and folks selling franchises or entrepreneurial businesses trying to hire somebody or bring somebody on board with sweat equity to basically take advantage of them. So there's a lot of problems with hiring, especially when it's made affordable. And these artificial intelligence based job boards, they don't connect skills with the actual jobs really well. They're not sophisticated enough yet. So there's problems there. Employee tenure, how long employees have worked for you. Again, another controversial issue. Some people feel like tenure should not matter, and other people feel like it's really important. Well, just because you've been in a job for really long doesn't mean that you've improved, or that you have learned modern ways. Sometimes the employees who have been there for 20, 30 years maybe repeat the old tricks, and yesterday's solutions are today's problems. So that's not necessarily always good. Turnover is typically, as a rule of thumb, over 10% turnover is typically something to look into. Now, obviously, there are some industries, hospitality, for example, where turnover tends to be routinely higher, and you are hiring pretty entry-level people. And then you have, higher professional organizations, engineering law firms, type of hospitals and things like that, that you probably don't want to have that much of a turnover. That is not acceptable. So it all depends. But I always use the kind of 10%, 10 to 15%, and being a zone when you start getting concerned about it. There's involuntary turnover, and there is voluntary turnover. Some employees leave because they find a better job. They find a better job because you gave them fantastic training and improved their skills, and made them better at something. So now they can find a better job somewhere. That's voluntary turnover, and in many ways that's positive. You can't keep your people forever. You have to give them an opportunity to grow in their careers. And if you can't promote them and give them that next step, then somebody else will. Also, people retire, and so that can happen. But you also can have involuntary turnover, because and that's really one that you're worried about when you are laying people off, firing people because it didn't work out. That's sometimes tricky. And by the way, it's sometimes difficult to differentiate between firing and layoffing. Many companies lay people off when they really want to fire them, just because they don't want to become subject for lawsuits. So they say, well, discontinue the position. And then they come up with almost same position with a different title to hire a new person in. They really wanted to get rid of the other person before that for the performance, but it's easier to lay them off than to fire them in terms of legal, protection wise, and, justification. So it's tricky. So human capital is really, really, important these days, and so there are different ways to measure human capital, which is basically the total knowledge and skills, that your employees hold and have, and you try to have as much human capital as possible. So there are some metrics that you can use when you are trying to benchmark and report that. What is the number of your HR staff? How many people you have working in HR department? HR to employee ratio, how many HR people you have versus rest of the employees? What is the percentage of HR staff in supervisory roles? Kind of shows what opportunities they have and how much decision making HR has in an organization. Percentage of HR staff in professional technical roles, that's a little trickier. How to serve in a professional technical role as a HR staff when there's not that many professional technical roles in many organizations, but there's increasing amount. Human resources information systems is very technical, and then you have professionals, even attorneys, labor employment attorneys that are working for human resource departments that are professional. You could have psychologists, you could have lots of different professionals in big corporations that are part of HR staff. And then, of course, how much you have HR staff in administrative support roles. You want to measure that as well. You don't want to have everybody in support roles, because that starts indicating that you really don't, that the managers really don't know what they're doing because they need so much support. The reporting structure for the head of HR, that's kind of something that keep an eye on and measure. Types of HR positions, again, that organization expect to hire in the future. This is a report from 2011 or thereabouts. So that's why it's using the 2011 mark. So you have expectations for revenue and organizational hiring. Percentage of organizations expecting changes in revenue. So you look at that. Percentage of organizations expecting changes in hiring. So this is human capital benchmarking report, from HR, from Society for Human Resource Management. So these are the metrics that they used to compare different organizations. A few more over here. HR expense data, how much HR spends money, what is the expense to operating expense ratio, expense to full-time employee ratio. So all of these sort of, how costly is the human resource department, how costly is the operation. That's obviously very important. Compensation data, how many people get annual salary increases, what are the salaries as a percentage of operating expense. Many companies' salaries represent 70%, 80% of the total expense for the company. So many organizations are very, very HR, very payroll heavy, because it's all about people and who you hire. Target bonus for non-executives, if that's made available, that's something that you want to measure. Obviously, target bonus for executives. Executive makes significant bonuses, and that can become very expensive for company as well. So for more profitable organizations out there, they some of these metrics that are used in all, they specifically use total HR staff, HR to employee ratio, HR expenses. So this is just a list of some of those metrics that were listed in other categories here that Society for Human Resource Management found in their report, that more profitable organizations, they tend to use those specific metrics. Does that make sense? So also they found that tuition education data is important to measure, because that shows that you're trying to improve your human capital. So you look at what is the maximum reimbursement allowed for tuition education expenses, what is the percentage of employees taking advantage of those education reimbursement, tuition reimbursement programs. So that's important. And again, more of metrics that more profitable organizations used, such as target bonus for executives, tuition expense per year, so that's again examples of benchmarks of what type of metrics companies that are successful tend to track. So this is a sort of laundry list of a lot of different metrics that can be used. The important thing about metrics is that they have to be strategy based. You don't just measure metrics just for nothing. They have to be specifically focused on measuring those activities that contribute to achieving company strategic aims. And that's where the tricky part comes in. Not just measuring something for the sake of measuring it, but choosing those metrics from the laundry list that we talked about, in a few previous slides. You use those metrics that are specifically working for your strategy and work for you. You don't just pick them just because they sound good. You figure out how does it support your strategic aims. So companies do these HR audits. They basically checklists of make sure that all the functions are completed, make sure that they meet the metrics and so forth. And audits can be done annually. They can be done quarterly. Depends on companies how they want to do it. But it's just basically a checklist of different metrics to audit the HR department to make sure that they are doing a good job. There are trends in HR. Information is being collected. AI, artificial intelligence, is a big part of that. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the first session. So information is valuable. So that's what organizations are focusing on, how to collect the right information, how to analyze the right information, how to have algorithms in place. So data analytics, is important. You have the right processes, right methods, right techniques to analyze the data, and how do you manage big data? Because these HRIS systems are able to produce massive amounts of data. And so, we have so much data that we don't know how to do with it, what to do with it. And it's big data. It's big, even government data that we can use. I mean, it's way easier these days to use government census data and whatever than it used to be back in the day, because everything is available for all of us through computer. So, just how to use data wisely and help with your strategic decision making. That's kind of a big trend in HR right now, and everybody's talking about it. Evidence-based HR, so how do we analyze all that data sort of scientifically and prove that something is working, something is not working scientifically, not just that, we feel like it works, but how do we scientifically prove that certain things kind of work and don't work? So management is a science. It's been a science for a long time. Now, human resource management as a subsection of management is really becoming more scientific. It's not just about filling the slots and staffing the people, and managing the paperwork and payroll. It's a lot more sort of scientific enterprise these days, where HR people are more strategic. They manage by data, make decisions by data. And so, that's where it's going. There's performance work systems in place these days, policies and practices that are being followed to track the right things, the right HR metrics, and what employees must do, and encourage employee involvement and self-management. I always talk about self-managing teams. Managers' dream is to train self-managing teams, and that just means that the team is so good at doing their job that they don't need the supervisor day to day to be telling them how to do it. So how to get there and how to set up policies and practices, best practices to help companies to get there and people to get there, that's a big thing. We have a few more minutes left, so I want to say one more thing over here that is an important and has been important for many years right now, and that is the concept of employee engagement. I mean, it's one thing to hire people, it's one thing to pay people, but how do you engage people? How do you really, really get people psychologically involved and connected and committed to the job? My wife wrote her dissertation on online adjunct faculty, kind of like what I'm doing right now here, and measuring their engagement and commitment to the universities. And what she found is that faculty members were very engaged and very committed, but they were engaged and committed to the field that they are teaching, not necessarily to the institution in general, which means that universities and colleges, when they're managing faculty, have to make sure that they, do something to keep their faculty engaged. And it's just, she works in academia, so she used that as a population, but the same applies to any organization and any industry. Employees are only good when they are engaged. And so, when they studied engagement, the Gallup found that 30% of employees were engaged, 50% of them not engaged, and 20% actively disengaged, actively working against the company. Those are pretty alarming numbers. So how do you get there? You provide supportive supervision, make sure your employees understand how the departments contribute, and sort of see how their efforts contribute in achieving goals. And give people a sense of accomplishment, give them awards people like to, feel acknowledged. Make sure that people are highly involved in decision-making and activities, and that make managers responsible for the employee engagement, so that managers are measured by the engagement level of the employees. That's sort of important. So there's some measures. There's Gallup and Towers Watson. They have an employee engagement survey. Accenture is also, they have a method, that shorthand method that can be used. And you can read about employee engagement guide for managers in a book. Okay, so we are probably going to be cut off in a minute over here. So, well, we probably have 5 minutes left or something like that. So, sorry, I'm talking a lot. Do you have any questions at this point? Anything that I can answer? Anything at all? Is everybody still awake?
Yes, Professor. All attention to you, and it's a great knowledge you're sharing. Thank you.
We're awake.
All right, good. Well, thank God for coffee, right?
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know where to find me if you have any questions. Stay tuned for easy quiz coming up soon, and I'll post it tomorrow and give you a few days to do it. Okay,
that would be great, Professor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good to see you all again.
Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great rest of the
Have a
day.
great weekend.
Thank you so much.
Have a nice
Bye.
weekend.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Professor, goodbye.
Enjoy your weekend, Prof.
Bye.